Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. I'm Nick Park, and yesterday I was talking about Voltaire. Voltaire was the French philosopher and writer who, and also a Freemason by the way, was somebody who's often thought of as being an atheist, but in fact he was a deist. He believed that God did exist, but that God did not interfere in the world today, basically created the world and left us to it, and he didn't even necessarily believe that God was good. But although Voltaire made a big fuss about the problem of evil, why is there evil in the world if God is good and God is all powerful? But he didn't adequately deal with a greater problem, which is the problem of good. If God isn't good, and if God isn't there, then why is there such great good in the world, despite the evil that is there? And Voltaire himself said the greatest good in all the earth was Christians who selflessly gave their lives to serve others. Now, the reason why I was thinking about Voltaire and why I began to remember reading some of his books a number of years ago is that Janice and I, my wife, we went earlier this month to Portugal. We went to Lisbon in Portugal, which by the way is a beautiful city. If you get the chance to go to Lisbon, it's a wonderful city to visit for a few days. And as we were sort of planning out what we were going to do, all the usual tourist spots we would visit and the best restaurants to go and eat and all that sort of good stuff, I saw reference to a museum called Quake. And I thought, Quake, hang on. And that reminded me that I'd forgotten that in Lisbon there was once one of the worst earthquakes in modern times, certainly in Europe. There was an earthquake there in the 18th century, in 1755, that caused great devastation. It killed 10% of the population of the city, made half the city homeless, also basically economically crippled Portugal, which was a great world power then. There's reason why people in Brazil speak Portuguese, and in African countries like Angola and Mozambique and even some parts of the Far East. And the reason is because Portugal was once a great world power. But that ended with this earthquake in 1755. And what happened, it was so bad and it was so devastating that people said, well, how could a good God allow this to happen? And so Voltaire basically wrote a book which was basically called Candide, which was mocking the idea that we lived in the best of all possible worlds. But you know what, when we look at the Lisbon earthquake, and it was particularly poignant that it occurred on a major Christian feast day. It was on the 1st of November. It was on All Saints' Day. And the churches were packed, and as the churches collapsed in the earthquake, many people were killed as they worshipped. And so it does show that there's evil in the world, undoubtedly. But you see, the whole issue of the Christian gospel is not trying to explain why there is evil in the world, but rather that God has a solution to evil. Because even following that dreadful earthquake, there was tremendous self-sacrifice by Christians that were caring for others. Now, I do personally believe that this is the best of all possible worlds. And you might say, well, how can that be when there's suffering and things that can go so wrong? But the fact is that God gave us free will. And when God gave us free will has to mean something. It's no good being given free will if you can't actually choose anything that significantly alters your life or anybody else's life. For free will to mean anything at all, it means there are consequences. You are choosing things that are actually important rather than just having the free will to choose whether you wear a blue shirt or a yellow shirt tomorrow morning. And when you make those choices, if you make bad choices, there are results, and those results can be devastating. And the reason why free will is so important is because without free will, you cannot have love. Because you cannot program a computer to love you. The only way you can genuinely have love is where you have a real freedom of choice, either not to love or to love. And love, when it is freely given, is the greatest thing in all the universe. And I would say when people look at the suffering in the world and say, well, nothing is worth having this much suffering in the world, it would be better off if the world hadn't been created, they haven't understood the power of free will, and they haven't understood the power of love. You know, as a young man, I reached a point in my life where, or actually as a child, where I was determined not to love anybody. I'd loved and I'd got hurt. My mother had died when I was very young, and I knew how much it hurt, and I just didn't want to love anyone again and risk hurting like that ever again. But I had to learn to love again, and coming to Jesus Christ and giving my heart to him and being born again by faith enabled me to love once again. And I believe love is the greatest thing in all the world, and the free will that allows us to freely choose to love God and to love one another is truly a great thing as well. And so I do believe, contrary to what Voltaire mocked and how he mocked the argument that this is the best of all possible worlds, I believe that this is the best of all possible worlds. Is there evil? Yes. Is there suffering? Yes. Is that devastating? Is that sometimes overwhelming? Yes, yes, yes. But free will that we have the power. No matter what anyone else does to you, you have the power to choose. You have the power to love. You have the power to hate. You have the power to accept Jesus. You have the power to reject the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when you choose to love God and love him with all your heart, it makes everything worthwhile. God bless you today. Join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.